The European Union is preparing to impose additional tariffs on approximately 100 billion euros, about $113 billion, worth of U.S. goods if current trade negotiations with Washington fail. This comes as the EU pursues a massive $2 trillion trade agreement with many countries, including Canada. The proposed measures, still in draft form, will be shared with EU member states as early as Wednesday, followed by a month-long consultation period, during which the list of targeted goods may be revised. These tariffs would add to the existing 21 billion euros already imposed by the EU in retaliation for President Donald Trump's earlier tariffs on steel and aluminum exports. This move signals the EU's growing frustration with stalled trade negotiations. Talks, which resumed last month, have yielded little progress. EU officials believe most of the U.S. tariffs currently in place will likely remain, with Trump's ongoing trade probes now threatening to raise tariffs on up to €549 billion worth of EU exports. In an effort to ease tensions, the European Commission plans to submit a new proposal to the U.S. this week aimed at revitalizing the stalled negotiations. The offer is expected to include measures to lower both tariff and non-tariff trade barriers, along with increased European investment in the U.S. Despite these efforts, the U.S. has so far rejected EU overtures, focusing instead on issues such as digital services taxes, regulation of tech companies, and VAT policies. The European Commission maintains that its tax and regulatory frameworks are fair, transparent, and apply equally to all market participants. Meanwhile, the EU has delayed implementing some of its countermeasures by 90 days following a U.S. decision to reduce its so-called reciprocal tariff rate on most EU exports from 20% to 10%. Trump's administration has already imposed a 25% tariff on EU cars and car parts and is pursuing further duties on a wide range of imports, including lumber, pharmaceuticals, semiconductors, critical minerals, and trucks. These import taxes are seen as unjustified and economically damaging for both sides of the Atlantic, according to EU Trade Commissioner Maros Šefčovič during an address to lawmakers in Strasbourg. This situation is unacceptable, and the EU cannot remain passive, he said. The Commission has not ruled out additional retaliatory steps, including targeting services and restricting certain exports to the United States. Trade data highlights the imbalance in goods trade. In 2024, the EU exported €531.6 billion in goods to the United States while importing €333.4 billion, resulting in a €198.2 billion goods trade surplus. However, when services are factored in, the U.S. maintains a surplus, narrowing the overall gap. As the transatlantic trade dispute intensifies, EU officials say their response will be calculated, aimed at maximizing economic pressure on the United States while minimizing disruption to Europe's own supply chains. Earlier responses to U.S. tariffs have targeted politically sensitive American exports such as soybeans from Louisiana, the home state of House Speaker Mike Johnson. The time has come for decisive action in defense of Europe's economic interests, Šefčovič declared. Our goal is to preserve a strong competitive economy and a unified society. While the European Union is still dealing with Trump's administration, the bloc is also expanding its trade with various countries worth more than $2 trillion. The EU is moving swiftly to finalize trade agreements with countries around the world in an effort to reduce its dependence on the United States amid concerns that the transatlantic relationship has suffered lasting damage. European Commission Vice President and Chief Trade Negotiator Maros Šefčovič is set to visit Washington on Monday, where he will push for a rollback of tariffs imposed by President Donald Trump. These duties currently affect around 380 billion euros, $432 billion in EU exports. As hopes for a return to normal EU trade relations fade, the EU is intensifying efforts to expand and diversify its trade network. The EU already boasts the world's most extensive trade agreement network, covering 75 partners and more than 2 trillion euros in commerce. However, shifting away from the US as a vital economic partner is a daunting task. In 2023, transatlantic trade in goods and services totaled 1.6 trillion euros. Europe continues to focus on diversifying its trade partnerships, engaging with countries that account for 87% of global trade shares our commitment to free and open exchange, said European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen in a statement last Thursday. To accelerate trade expansion, the Commission has urged EU member states to speed up the ratification of pending agreements. Political resistance, particularly from countries like France, which has strong protectionist policies in sectors like agriculture, has previously slowed progress. Trump's aggressive trade measures, most notably the imposition of tariffs on steel, aluminum, and a range of goods from major trading partners, have reignited the European Union's urgency to diversify its trade relationships and pursue new deals beyond traditional allies. These actions disrupted long-standing transatlantic economic ties and prompted the EU to reassess its strategic dependencies. In response, Brussels has accelerated negotiations with nations across Asia and the Middle East, including the United Arab Emirates, Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, and India. These countries represent fast-growing markets with expanding middle classes and significant demand for European technology, luxury goods, and services. In parallel, the EU is revisiting its trade relationship with the United Kingdom, aiming to refine the post-Brexit trade framework. Since the UK's departure from the EU in 2020, the two sides have maintained trade under the EU-UK Trade and Cooperation Agreement. However, ongoing challenges such as regulatory divergence and customs issues have spurred new rounds of dialogue to improve access and streamline cooperation. Currently, free trade agreements, FTAs, cover approximately 45% of the EU's trade with non-EU countries, enabling preferential access to key markets and reducing barriers such as tariffs and quotas, according to data from the European Commission. Pending trade agreements, which are signed but not yet ratified, including those with Mercosur, Chile, and Mexico, could boost EU trade volumes by more than 185 billion euros. These agreements are seen as crucial in strengthening the EU's global competitiveness and reducing reliance on any single market. As part of a broader pivot toward Asia and the Indo-Pacific, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen announced on Thursday that the EU will intensify engagement with the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, CPTPP. The CPTPP, which evolved from the original Trans-Pacific Partnership after the U.S. withdrawal in 2017 under President Trump, includes 11 member states across the Pacific Rim, such as Canada, Japan, Australia, Vietnam, and Mexico. These countries collectively account for around 13% of global GDP. New Zealand's Prime Minister Christopher Luxon has proposed a bold initiative to expand the CPTPP into a broader, rules-based trading bloc that would incorporate the EU. This proposal reflects a growing appetite among like-minded economies for multilateral trade frameworks based on shared standards, transparency, and sustainability. For the EU, aligning with the CPTPP could open significant new economic opportunities, deepen geopolitical ties in the Indo-Pacific region, and reinforce its commitment to an open, rules-based international trade order in the face of growing protectionism and global fragmentation. Tensions with the United States continue to rise. Trump recently announced a 20% reciprocal tariff on nearly all EU exports, later delaying its implementation by 90 days and setting a 10% rate in the meantime. These new duties add to a 25% tariff on EU steel, aluminum, and automotive exports, with threats of further tariffs on items like lumber, semiconductors, and pharmaceuticals. In response, the EU is exploring strategies to shield its market from trade disruptions. One concern is that Trump's steep new tariffs on Chinese goods may prompt China to redirect excess supply to Europe. To address these risks, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen recently held a high-level call with Chinese Premier Li Keqiang, during which she raised the issue of trade diversion and its possible consequences for European manufacturers. Von der Leyen proposed establishing a formal mechanism for monitoring such shifts in trade patterns, aimed at providing early warning of abnormal trade developments.